Hey everybody, welcome. So today what we're going to be covering is the 15 beliefs that I had to overcome in order to be able to move past my anxiety. And for any of you guys who've been struggling with anxiety for a really long time, this will definitely be applicable to you, especially if you felt like you've had it since childhood. I think that you're going to find a lot of this very applicable to you. So if you're brand new to our community, or unsure what we do, welcome. My name's Ty Hicks, founder of mentalhealthcoaching.com. We put this free content out there for you guys to make sure that you can learn what's necessary to make sure that you really overcome anxiety. And so for me, many of you guys know about my mental health journey, some of you don't. But I had pretty extreme anxiety and then also debilitating depression for a couple of years that made me suicidal. And I really struggled for a long period of time to contemplate, was there a way for me to actually overcome it? Because I was using coping strategies and I found some results with those, as I'm sure you guys have as well: medication, therapy, counseling, and then also some more self-administered things: journaling, meditation, basically anything I could find online. And I was having a really tough time making any type of substantial headway. And so what I realized was I got into this period where I was feeling a lot of despair, really, and I was really unsure whether or not I'd be able to get my mental health where I wanted it to be long term. And I think that many of you may be in a very similar place. And what I have come to learn since then is that the single biggest limiter in our lives, very truly, are the beliefs that we have about our circumstances. And I know that sounds very motivational and kind of like woo woo, okay, you got to eliminate your limiting beliefs. But I really mean this from a very tactical standpoint. I want to make sure I give you some very practical things to absorb in this session today. And I want to make sure that you can actually make a shift in your way of looking at the world. But basically, here's the simplest thing I want you to think about. If you believe that you cannot overcome anxiety, if that's what you feel completely certain of, then what do you think your chances are of actually overcoming the anxiety? Probably zero, right? And so this is the first big foundational thing I really want you to understand, is that what was keeping me full of anxiety and keeping me full of depression were the presumptions that I was going to keep anxiety and depression as a part of my life long term. And I had 15 unique beliefs that I had to move past in order to truly substantially overcome the anxiety and the depression for good. And I've been free of both of them for over 10 years now. And this is not hyperbole. This is not like pie in the sky. Like, I'm telling you, these are the things that I used to believe, and these are the things I had to change. And what I've learned is that if you are not getting what it is that you want in your life, particularly in your mental health, it's because you have one or more limiting beliefs in the way. So if you're not getting what you want in terms of a relationship, if a relationship is not at the quality you want, it's because you have one or more limiting beliefs in the way. It may be a limiting belief about your own self-worth. It may be a limiting belief about, are you guys right for each other? It may be a limiting belief about what you're willing to do versus what you require them to do. If you're having trouble moving forward in a business or a career or earning more, I guarantee you, you may not be consciously aware of it, but you have at least one or more limiting beliefs in the way that's keeping you from moving forward. You may have limiting beliefs about whether or not the market actually wants your product, or what your own value is in the marketplace, or whether you can go for that promotion at your job. All of those fears keep you from taking action. The more fears that we have, the less action we take. The less action we take, the worse results we get. The worse results we get, the more sure we become that bad things are going to take place in the future. The more sure we become that bad things will take place in the future, the less action we take. And on and on and on the cycle goes. So it's a 4-part cycle. First, there's a thought or a belief. So there could be a thought or a belief. For example, I'm going to tell you the very first belief that I had that was keeping me riddled with anxiety and depression was, I've tried everything. That was one of my old beliefs. I've tried everything. And I want you to recall there's a 4-step cycle. We call it the thought cycle. So the very first thing you'll have is you'll have a thought or belief. The second thing that will occur is you're going to have a feeling that is a result of that thought or belief. The third thing that happens is you will take some type of action, or you will not take action, but not taking action is just another form of taking action. And then you will get some type of results, and that would be step 4. And then the results tend to create further thoughts. And so all of these beliefs that I had created a feeling in me that I could not overcome the anxiety or the depression. When you feel that you cannot overcome anxiety or depression, you end up engaging in certain actions and behaviors that cause the anxiety and the depression to continue and to prolong themselves. So, for example, we tend to drown ourselves in distraction oriented behavior, in numbing behavior, focusing on, say, social media, TV, right, things like that, just to kind of numb ourselves. And then, of course, as we do those, that doesn't make our mental health any better, and so we get bad results. And as we get bad results, we have the next thought of, oh, well, I guess I'm really not going to be able to overcome the anxiety and the depression. So that's what I want you guys to be keeping in mind, is this 4-step cycle as I go through each of these 15 limiting beliefs. The first one, okay, the first part of the cycle is we have a thought or a belief that creates a feeling. From that feeling, third of all, we get a behavior, and then fourth of all, we get some type of a result. And then the cycle repeats. And this is what keeps people stuck for many months, many years, many decades. And now that I've helped almost 600 people reduce their anxiety by at least 75%, I've seen this cycle play out many times. And so these 15 beliefs that kept me full of anxiety and depression, I've also seen play out in other people too. Okay? So the very first one that I had was that I've tried everything, so therefore I can't change. Right? I've tried everything. Now, one of the key things we teach our clients is that using universal language is one of the most easy ways to create a higher level of anxiety than is necessary, because almost always using universal language doesn't make any sense, and it's a generalization. So we end up distorting reality when we use universal language. So if I say I've tried everything, of course, there's no way that that could possibly be true, right? There's probably several hundred, if not several thousand different ways of things you could do to impact your mental health. And then beyond the courses and the content and all the things that impact your mental health potentially for the positive, there's also plenty of things that you can do that would indirectly improve your mental health. So for someone to say I've tried everything is one of the most limiting beliefs that we can possibly use on ourselves, because it will basically generate a feeling of learned helplessness. I mean, think about it. If you tell yourself, I have tried everything, what kind of feeling is that going to create? It's going to create a feeling of, well, I have no other options. And I can give you a shortcut to improving your mental health, which is that we feel anxiety and depression in direct proportion to how few choices we convince ourselves we have. So I was at one point convincing myself, well, I've tried everything, so therefore I don't have any other options. And when you have that thought, and then you have the feeling of I have no options, what kind of behavior do you think you're going to engage in? Well, the behavior I engaged in was I would just try to numb myself and distract myself all day, every day. I would try to not think about it. I would catastrophize. I would imagine that the future was going to be bad no matter what. I would basically feel like nobody was supporting me. I felt like I was being, left out to dry. I felt like my therapist wasn't doing his job. I felt like my psychiatrist wasn't doing their job. I blamed everybody. I felt very reactive to the world. I felt very disempowered because I convinced myself I had tried everything. And it was a totally false belief. So one of the key things we do with every client, no matter what their specific situation is we have to widen up the amount of choices that they can perceive are possible for themselves. And the only reason they've convinced themselves that they have fewer choices than they actually have is because they have blind spots. So we have to open up those blind spots. By the way, let me know in the comments if you can relate to this, if this sounds like something that you've ever said to yourself. Have you ever told yourself, I've tried everything? Just go ahead and put yes in the comments and let me know. I'd be curious to see. But I think this is a common one for people, so I wanted to lead with it. Now, the truth. I'm going to give you the old belief and then what the truth is. Now, the truth that I had to engage in is that I certainly had not tried everything. And what I had realized was that basically what happened was I encountered somebody when I was in an inpatient program, and I encountered this young woman who was incredibly joyful. She was not riddled with anxiety or depression. She was very, very joyful, but she came from really tough circumstances. She came from a household where there was a lot of physical and sexual abuse. And so in my head, I kind of thought to myself, you know what? If she can live without depression and anxiety, I can live without depression and anxiety too. And so that belief is what's really true. And so the belief that I had was there's something that she is doing that is different than what I'm doing. She may not even be consciously aware of what it is that she's doing, but there's something about her that's causing her to feel how she wants to feel. Whereas I haven't even survived a fraction of as difficult of situations as she has, yet I'm riddled with anxiety and depression. So the belief shift I had to have is if somebody else can do it, I can do it too. And I'd encourage you to put that in the comments and write that down, because you want to list these out. List out all of these 15 and then list out the antidote or the truth to each one of them. And then I'm going to give you some practical steps at the end of how to actually shift your belief systems. Okay, but that was the very first one that I had to have, is if somebody else can overcome anxiety and depression, I can too. I just have to learn what they know and I can reap a similar result. And that, think about it that way, right? If I have that thought of if someone else can do it, I can do it too, that thought is going to create a very different feeling. That feeling created hope and confidence and a sense of certainty. And now I had a willingness to take action, right? To move forward, to learn new ideas. And the willingness to take action and move forward is the very thing that's necessary to overcome anxiety. So I was already on my path to overcoming anxiety by changing that first belief. Okay. Belief number 2 was I've already tried medication, which hasn't worked. And apparently this is a biochemical issue. So if the medication isn't working, I obviously can't change. So I had a belief in the past that anxiety and depression was all biochemical, that it was just, this, it could be explained as just a mental illness and you've got a biochemical imbalance and that's what medication is for. And I had this belief because I had people I knew, let's just keep it that way, we'll keep it vague so I don't, betray anybody's confidence, but there were people that were very close to me and that I knew who had been on medication for many years, and they seemed to be much worse when they were not on medication, and they seemed to be much better when on medication. And so when my anxiety and depression started to really manifest in my early teens, then all of a sudden I started to think of it as just a biochemical thing. And that's how many of you probably think about anxiety and depression, is it's just a biochemical thing. And I got to tell you that I had to overcome this belief to actually overcome the anxiety and the depression. And I'll tell you why. Basically, I was on the medication. It wasn't working. It made me feel like a zombie. Another one that they tried just made me feel sleepy and groggy all the time. Another one made me feel like nothing, made me feel like numb. Some of them gave me weird side effects. It just wasn't really working for me. It was like I was trading one benefit for one negative, and I wasn't for that. And so I thought, well, if this is a biochemical issue and I'm taking all of these things to adjust my biochemistry and I feel like garbage, then really my future is just going to be a piece of crap. It's not going to be good. And so that thought, of course, would create a feeling of hopelessness and then a less willingness to think of new options and new possibilities and take new action. And that created bad results, just the same old bad results again. So what I had to start to realize was that other people had figured out a way to get rid of anxiety or depression without medication. And I knew that, at least for me, I'm not saying that medication is not right for everybody. Like, some people do really well with it, and that's great. I'm also not telling you to stop taking your medication right now if that's what you're doing, especially if that's like the only thing that you have going for you, right? But it wasn't working for me. And so I knew I had to find something else. And thankfully, I had a role model. There was this woman, again, the same woman that I met in this inpatient program, and she was not on medication. And the only reason she was in the inpatient program was because she was still technically a minor. She was like 17 at the time. And her family member had brought her there basically for her own safety to escape from her father who was abusing her. But she had so much joy and so much lightness and so much of a sense of peace of mind. And I interviewed her basically. I was so curious. I was just a teenager at the time, but I was like, how do you feel so much joy? And she, what I started to realize was that there were things that were different about her mindset. It wasn't that she was just getting pumped full of more Xanax. In fact, she wasn't on any medication. And that's what was really interesting to me. I was like, okay, you're not on medication. You come from an even worse background in childhood than I come from, but somehow you are not feeling depressed and anxious. And so that was the really fascinating thing for me, is I had to realize there's something that you're doing differently, and it's not tied to just your biochemistry. And so that was the big thing that started to awaken things for me too, because she told me she had been on medication previously, but she wasn't now. And I'm like, how in the world could you be feeling better now while you're off medication? So again, I had to realize, like, there's something different that's going on than just a biochemical deficiency. And so I'll tell you the belief that started to shift things for me. When I stopped looking at anxiety and depression as a biochemical imbalance, but instead I started to look at it as a set of conditioned patterns inside of the mind. What I started to learn as I interviewed this girl that I went into the inpatient program with is that she had a different way of looking at the world. She had different automatic negative thoughts, for example, or excuse me, just automatic thoughts. I had automatic negative thoughts. She had automatic positive thoughts, even though she came from a more debilitating um, environment. She came from a worse situation with her family. And so what I realized was that I took elements of my childhood, interactions with my parents, and I processed them totally differently than she was processing even worse situations than I was experiencing. So in other words, I was dealing with, I had some problems with my childhood and some disagreements with my parents and things, but they're good people. But there were some things going on in my household in my childhood that I interpreted in the most negative possible light and a hopeless light, whereas she would say things to me like, well, yeah, my dad hurts me, but, I only have a year or two left until I go to college. And so she had a very forward looking mindset where I had a very backward looking mindset. And so I started to realize that she had automatic ways of processing things that were different than me. So I started to think, well, wait a minute. She is just looking at the world differently. She just has automatic patterns of thinking that are different than me. And I started to realize that a lot of these patterns of thinking were totally involuntary on my part. They were subconscious. My mind kept thinking about everything I regretted from the past. My mind kept thinking about what I was afraid was going to happen in the future. And it kept bouncing back and forth between those two things perpetually. And what I realized is, wait a minute. I have simply gotten to a point in the past couple of years where my mind has become trained to focus on what I regret about the past and what I fear about the future. I can train my brain to be able to stay in the present and to think about the future in a positive way. There's got to be a way for me to train myself to do that. And that became really, really powerful once I started to realize I could model somebody else's mindset. I could actually shift my automatic thoughts. I could train my brain to have different automatic thoughts. I didn't know how yet, but that was the idea that I kind of grasped onto, and it started to make everything change and be possible for me. So that's kind of the shift in the truth. The old belief, I already tried medication, and this is a biochemical issue, so if medication's not working, therefore I can't change. The truth, it's not just a biochemical issue. The truth is that your brain fires off a biochemistry based off of your automatic thoughts. So for example, I'll show you a really simple example. Right now, in this moment, right now, I want you to do a little thought experiment. Think about all the things on your to-do list in the next 72 hours. Just do that real quick. Think about all the things on your to-do list in 72 hours. Now, as you think about all of those things you got to do in the next 72 hours, does that increase your anxiety level? Yes or no? Go ahead, let me know in the comments. Yes or no? Chances are that just increased your anxiety level a little bit. Now, what did we do right there? I had you change a thought. And when you changed a thought, it changed your biochemistry inside of the brain. Okay, so by changing our automatic thoughts, we change our biochemistry. We can use medication to try to dampen the biochemical effects of the automatic thoughts. But if we don't change the automatic thoughts from the source, then we're never really getting to the real root of the issue. And that's what I realized. Medication was not sufficient for me. And then in the past 10 plus years, as I've been working with people on these issues, I've realized medication is not sufficient for most people. And it's for this exact same reason, because they keep having automatic negative thoughts, and they have medication to try to dampen the effects of the automatic negative thoughts, but they don't deal with the automatic negative thoughts. And so the anxiety is still there. And so that's really the core problem. So we got to deal with the automatic negative thoughts. Third big belief I had that limited me was, well, I've already done therapy for a year and more, and it hasn't been working, so therefore I can't change. So, right, I came from the traditional mode that you guys came from, right? I had a suicide attempt. I went to an inpatient program. I got all my diagnoses. They put me on medication. They put me in therapy. I was on medication and therapy for over a year. It wasn't really working for me. And I was doing what I was told to do, right? When people first sat me down and explained to me, oh yeah, you have clinical depression, you have general anxiety disorder. When all of that was told to me, I thought, I felt a sense of relief initially because I was like, okay, cool, it's not my fault, it's that I have this issue, right? And a lot of you guys can probably relate to that feeling. And then I thought, oh, okay, I'm supposed to do therapy and I'm supposed to do medication. And I was just a teenager at the time. So I'm like, okay, cool, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what'll make me feel better. Let's do that. And after like 3 months, I wasn't really feeling any better, but I was like, all right, well, I might as well stick with it. After 6 months, I wasn't really feeling any better. And I'm like, okay, isn't it supposed to start kicking in by now? And after 12 months, I was like, okay, guys, it's been a full year. Like, why is this not working, right? Why do I feel basically the same as when I started? And that's when I realized, not when I realized, that's when I had the limiting thought of, okay, I've tried medication, I've tried therapy, therefore I've tried everything, and therefore I'm not going to be able to get rid of the anxiety and depression, which was totally untrue. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, because there is a huge chunk of people out there who are trying to do the right thing. They have anxiety, they have depression, they don't know how to get over it, and they're doing what they've been taught to do. And honestly, it's what you should start with if you've never done anything in most cases. I mean, sure, go ahead, try therapy, go ahead, try medication, but there's a huge chunk of people out there where that's not sufficient. Where after 6, 9, 12 months, you start to realize, okay, this is not really cutting it for me. And the worst thing you could do is to conclude, okay, well, because these haven't worked for me, nothing is going to work, and I've tried everything. That's not the truth. So what I had to shift into is, okay, medication and therapy have provided some value to me, but they're not sufficient. And I need to find what my missing piece is. Like maybe therapy and medication are good for a lot of people, but they're just not sufficient for me. So I got to find whatever that is that's going to really fill that need of mine. And that began the hunt for new solutions and new alternative methods. And again, I had to open up my options. I had to open up my perceived possibilities of what might be out there. But now that I had the thought of, you know what, maybe there's something else out there that could help me, that created a feeling of hope and desire. That created the behavior of asking new questions, looking for new types of help, looking for help in unexpected places, basically trying to get my hands on anything and everything that might be able to help me. And that's what created the results of finally finding a way to overcome the anxiety and the depression. But I had to initially imagine recovery was possible in order to get myself to take actions to move towards the recovery. That's the trick. You have to start from the premise of I can and I will overcome the anxiety. Can somebody please go ahead and put that in the chat, in the comments? I can and I will overcome anxiety, because that centralized belief, I will tell you, is really the core belief out of all of these 15 that I really had to grasp onto that made everything possible. Okay. Now, fourth belief that I had that was limiting was I need to be 100% sure of the method that I'm going to use. I need to be 100% sure that it's going to work before I decide I'm going to do it. So after I realized I needed to move past just therapy and medication, I started hunting for new solutions. And what I started to run into was another block, right? Now I was looking and Googling and searching for answers, but I wasn't getting better results. And the reason I wasn't getting better results was because I ran into another block, another limit. And the limit was I would learn a little bit about a lot of different ideas. So, I learned about DBT and EMDR and ECT and, all these different things and NLP and all this stuff. And the problem that I ran into was that my mind, as soon as I started to think about a possible method that could help me get rid of the anxiety and the depression, what would happen was my mind wanted complete and total certainty. And so what it would do is it would go into all of the what ifs. Well, what if it doesn't work out? And, what if I try really hard and, that doesn't go well? Or what if I spend a couple $100s on this and it doesn't really go well? Or what if I spend all this time and energy working with this person and it doesn't really work out? And so what my mind was doing was the exact pattern that I had to change. My mind was automatically assuming that a negative scenario in the future was going to take place before I had proof that it was going to take place. That's what anxiety is. And so that kept me in a limited spot where I was in information gathering mode for months. I wouldn't ever take any new action. I was learning all about all these different things and spending a lot of time on YouTube and all this stuff, but I wasn't committing to anything. And I learned a lot of skills. I learned a lot of tools and skills and methods that could eventually, could have been helpful to me. But I wasted so much time not taking action because I wanted to be 100% sure first. And this was the big belief change that I had that opened this up. The big belief change that I had to endorse was I will only gain certainty by taking action. So before, my old belief was I need to be totally certain that this method is going to work before I take action. The new belief that I adopted was I need to take action, and as I take action, I will get certainty. If I take action, I will either learn that this really truly doesn't work, but at least that way I'll know, or I'll take action and use it faithfully and do it to the best of my ability, and it will work. And that was what ended up happening. So as soon as I shifted that belief, I started finally taking action. So I started using some of the material that I was learning. I signed up for some courses. I got some mentorship. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But I don't regret any of it because every single step that I took got me one step closer to finding what truly worked for me. And that was the real key, right? Because if I would have just stayed in that mode of no, I need to be 100% certain before I move forward, then I'd still be in that spot. And some people are in that spot where they've spent 10 years thinking in their head through every single potential scenario of, well, what if I go with this therapist, or what if I do this course, or what if I do this coach, or what if I just use this stuff I'm learning in this YouTube video. They do analysis paralysis where they end up wasting their whole life. And so if what you're afraid of is, well, what if I try this method and I still have anxiety? What I would encourage you to do is to think, well, what if I try nothing and I stay just as bad as I am? Because that's the reality. That's probably what's happening already. So you have to operate from an assumption of, if I try something new, I will get some type of new result. Because new actions create new results. That's just the law of the universe. If you want different outputs, you got to generate different inputs. So once I started to realize that, the whole game changed for me and my real recovery began, and I was really on my way. All right, so that was number 4. I ditched the need to be 100% certain, and the more action I took, the more certainty I got as I started to implement each baby step. So that was a really key breakthrough for me. Okay, number 5 was I was thinking to myself, well, how do I know it's really going to work for me? Because I heard you just have to live with anxiety and depression forever. Now, this was one I had a little bit earlier in this journey, okay? But again, the key assumption that I had before was that anxiety and depression are permanent. And if they're permanent, that creates a feeling of helplessness, and it creates a feeling of, well, I just don't even want to face the day. I just want to spend all day in bed. I just want to go on my phone and play my video games and watch TV and wish my whole life away, basically, because I'm just assuming that I'm going to feel like crap for the rest of my life. And if that's my assumption, I'm going to feel that that's true. And if I feel that that's true, I'm going to take actions that make it so. That's the trap I was in for a long time. So here's what I shifted into, and this is what I would encourage you to consider doing so as well. My old definition of depression and anxiety was the idea that depression and anxiety are permanent, lifelong mental illnesses, right? I was using the medical model, what we call the pathological model. So this idea of it's either genetic or it's from your childhood or whatever, but basically that you can't control it, you can't do much about it, you're destined to have it until the day you die. That is a very strong narrative that is still being pushed out there, even though there are like millions upon millions of people who had very depressing, anxious periods of their life, who are now living without anxiety and depression, but no one ever talks about those. And so we just still have perpetuated this ongoing societal narrative that if you experience anxiety or depression for any period of time in your life, that it probably means that you're permanently screwed. And I got to tell you, I just don't buy into it. I don't believe it. I'm living proof that that's not the reality. The clients that we've had are proof of that as reality. And I've even known plenty of people outside of my clients who have become friends and acquaintances and colleagues of mine who found their own natural way to overcome anxiety and depression. Much of it had to do with adopting principles that I used as well. Much of it had to do with them finding their own customized way. But it is possible. It is absolutely possible. Once you define a problem in unsolvable terms, you will no longer take action to try to solve that problem. And by no longer taking action to solve the problem, you will never solve the problem. And as you never solve the problem, you will further believe the problem is unsolvable. And so on and so on and so on. And people will spend 30 years in that mindset of just assuming you got to live with anxiety and depression forever. And I got to tell you, it's just absolutely not true. I did it in my teens when I basically had no clue what the hell I was doing. But just by a relentless pursuit of I basically adopted this attitude of I can do this, I will do this. I'm not going to stop. If I don't stop looking for answers and I don't stop being willing to implement the answers that I learn, I cannot fail. That was my attitude. Maybe you want to write that down, because that belief was really what enabled my recovery. It was, if I can and I will, and so long as I don't stop implementing what I learn and trying new things until I find what works, if I don't stop, I will not be able to fail. And that was what enabled me to find the recovery. So rather than thinking of it as a permanent, lifelong illness that you have no control over, what I encourage you to do is recognize that yes, depression and anxiety are real, but they're not real in the way that we typically define them. What I mean is, don't think of depression and anxiety as like something you have, as in, oh, it's just a part of me. It's a part of who I am. My father was like this, therefore I'm destined to be like this. What I can tell you unequivocally, based on my own experience and hundreds of clients that we've helped through this process, is that anxiety and depression are real, but they are real in the sense that they are a set of conditioned patterns inside of the mind. And your mind can change if you have the right tools. That shift opened up so many doors. So that was a big thing that helped me. Okay, next one. Number 6, how do I know that I'll be able to overcome anxiety because I've made progress only to relapse again and again? So before, I had tried like 3 or 4 different methods, right? Therapy, counseling, medication, journaling, meditation, breathing exercises, all the basic stuff, physical exercise. I had done all 6 of those things, and some of them made me feel a little bit better. But I would feel a little bit better for a few weeks or a few months, and then I would relapse. And so then my thought was, well, hey, I relapsed, so it didn't really work. So if I'm just going to keep relapsing, I'm not going to be able to change this. Like, no matter what I try again, it might work for like a flash in the pan. Like maybe it'll work for a couple weeks or a couple months, but then I'm just going to relapse again. And again, remember the thought cycle. First we have a thought, then a feeling, then a behavior, then results. So if I had the thought of, no matter what I try, I'm just going to relapse again, because I've relapsed plenty of times before, that created a feeling of, why should I bother trying anything new? That created the actions of not trying anything new. That created the results of never getting further than I had already gotten. Because if you try nothing new, you'll never get anywhere different than where you've gotten before, right? Einstein had this famous quote where he said, you cannot solve a problem by using the same level of thinking that got you into the problem in the first place. But that's what we love to do, is we let anxiety keep us from overcoming anxiety. We imagine that we will fail in advance, and we allow that to be the evidence, in quotes, of we shouldn't even try, which is total garbage. So the shift that I had, right, the big shift that I had was this. The belief that I adopted instead was, if I don't commit to finding a way out of this, my life will be one perpetual relapse. So basically I said, well, look, I can either try to avoid relapsing again, but if I try to avoid relapsing again by doing nothing, then I just guarantee that I'm right at the bottom of the relapse forever. And so I thought, at least when I was trying new methods and I was really implementing things, I was feeling better for a while. Maybe each one of the things that I've tried so far has given me part of the solution. Maybe I would have thought that they were all of the solution, and maybe they were only part of the solution. Maybe I'm missing a piece. And that was the shift that really helped me, because I realized, okay, they clearly provided some level of value. Each of the things I've tried so far has provided some value, but it wasn't sufficient. It was valuable, but not sufficient. So I need to take what was valuable and carry it forward with me, and then keep hunting for what will be sufficient. And if I find what is actually sufficient, then eventually I won't have to deal with the relapse again. And that's exactly what happened. Now I am here over 10 years later, no anxiety, no depression, no relapses. Okay, so it's totally possible, but again, you can't do that whole, I imagine the future is going to be bad, so therefore I'm not going to take any action to make the future better. and therefore I'm going to guarantee that the future is bad. That's what I kind of realized. I realized that if I allowed my brain's assumptions that the future were going to be bad to govern my decision making, I'd be trapped in anxiety forever. And I had to get past that. Okay, number 7. The old belief I had was, how do I know that a new method might work for me, because I'm worried it's going to take a lot of time and work and effort. And so I had this fear of like, gosh, I've already tried therapy, I've done medication, I've done this program, I've done that. Why should I try something new, right? I'm just going to put in all these hours and all this effort and all this time, and I'm probably going to have to spend money. And then what if it doesn't work? And again, what I realized is, okay, I can either look at this as, what if I try really hard and I fail, and it doesn't go how I want? Or what if I don't try anything? What happens if I don't try anything and I stop trying? And what I realized is the pain of not trying is going to be far greater than the pain of trying. Because at least if I try literally everything I can think of, if I stay committed to finding a way to overcome this, if my number one guiding light principle is I will not quit and therefore I cannot lose, as long as I stick to that, I'll get there eventually. Like, okay, maybe it'll take me a year, maybe it'll take me 10 years. But 10 years of effort, this was what I said to myself. I was like, look, 10 years of effort to figure out how to overcome anxiety and depression would still mean I would have the majority of my life without anxiety and depression to live for. So it'd be worth it, even if it took me 10 years. Now, thankfully, it didn't. It took me only about 1 year. And then now, thankfully, the process that we hand over to people only takes them about 90 days because we've already taken the guesswork out. But you get my point. I mentally had to say to myself, look, even if it takes a lot of time and effort, putting in a lot of time and effort to learn how to overcome anxiety and depression is actually going to burn me less calories than just putting up with anxiety and depression forever, right? Because putting up with anxiety and depression is the most exhausting thing imaginable. So why would I be afraid of exhausting myself by trying to make it better? That makes no sense. I'm already exhausted. If I keep the anxiety and the depression, I'll be overwhelmed and exhausted forever. So I might as well try. So that was the big shift that I had too. And that helped me a lot. Okay, number 8. This is a big one. Big one. Okay, which was I'm not ready. So I had a couple mentors who approached me who thought that they could really help me with my mental health. And then I also had just some different knowledge sources, like some books and some courses and some different things like that. Even just some stuff I learned on YouTube for free that I wasn't using. And I kept telling myself, no, I'm not ready to do that. Yeah, I really should do that new method that I learned about last week, but I'm just not ready. And there wasn't even like a really specific reason for me saying I'm not ready, but really what it was I was wanting, this is what's so crazy about this, and I think you guys can relate, so I want to make sure you really get this. I was kind of waiting to no longer feel depressed and anxious to then take action to improve my depression and anxiety. Which, when you think about it, makes absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever. Because I basically would say things to myself like, well, gosh, I'm just so tired. I just don't think I can do it. I just don't feel motivated. I just don't feel sure that this is going to work. And if you think about it, all that is anxiety and depression talking. So why in the world would I let anxiety and depression be the thing that keeps me from taking action to overcome the anxiety and the depression? Do you see how totally ridiculous that is? I was basically waiting for this magic moment where I was gonna feel lightheaded and feel energetic and feel ready and feel totally sure. I was just procrastinating and waiting and delaying and numbing myself out, waiting for this magic moment. And then all of a sudden I realized I have wasted a whole year of my life waiting to feel ready. How much more time am I willing to waste for this moment that's never going to come where the anxiety and the depression handles itself? And I'll tell you the belief shift that I made, and this changed everything really. The belief shift that I had was, I am the one responsible for overcoming my anxiety and my depression. Nobody is going to come and do it for me. That was what I believed. I am responsible for overcoming my own anxiety and my own depression. No one's going to come and do it for me. And as soon as I took my power back and I realized, you know what? even if I don't feel like it, even if I don't feel motivated, even if I feel overwhelmed, the only way I'm going to feel any better is by taking some type of action. So let's do it. Let's start with this first book. Let's start with this first course. Whatever it is, let's do it. And I got into action taking mode. And that's what started to change everything. But I had to get past the excuses. And the big thing I'm just trying to impart to you is that I think that many of you guys may be in that same boat that I was in, where you're delaying taking action on your mental health because you're waiting for your mental health to be better first. And it just makes no sense to do that. It's like when I talk to people and they say, well, yeah, I've been out of work for a year and I had to leave work because of my anxiety level was so high. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, you probably should either like hire a therapist or a coach or do something like, do something that would improve your mental health. And they go, yeah, well, I just can't invest in my mental health right now because I don't have a job. And I'll say, yeah, but why don't you have a job? And they'll say, well, because my anxiety is so high. I'm like, so we're going to delay getting rid of the anxiety and hope that your financial situation miraculously changes? You're putting the cart before the horse. It makes no sense whatsoever, right? Getting the mental health handled first is the only thing that unlocks everything else. So I basically had to realize, like, look, I'm not going to feel like it. I'm not going to feel motivated. I'm not going to feel excited, but I got to do something. And basically adopting the belief of I don't need to wait until I feel ready. I don't need to wait until I feel motivated. I don't need to wait until I feel whatever. That belief is actually one I still use in a lot of situations, because there will be days, I did this earlier today actually, I woke up, felt groggy, felt sleepy, didn't want to work out, and I said, you know what? I don't need to want to work out in order to work out. I'm still going to work out because it's the right thing for me to do. It's the thing that makes my life better. I'll be proud of myself after I've done it. And even though I don't feel like it now, I'm not going to let my mood be the thing that dictates my decision making. Because if I do that, then I'm constantly at the whim of my mood. So as soon as I don't feel motivated to do something, I'm just not going to do it and it won't get done. I don't live my life by that principle generally. Even if I don't feel like doing something, if it's a must, if it's important to me, I'm going to get the damn thing done. And I encourage you to consider a similar attitude, because it is incredibly liberating. When you're no longer waiting to feel like it, but you just do what is necessary anyway, and you realize you don't need to wait until you feel like it. And if you wait until you feel like it, you're going to wait for most of your life, basically. That was a huge liberating thing that changed things for me. All right, number 9. Number 9 belief was I feel way too overwhelmed to commit to any kind of program or book or course or anything, to get help, get one-on-one help, to try anything new, basically. The whole objection I had was feeling overwhelmed. And I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling anxious. I was feeling depressed. I was feeling suicidal. And so in my brain, I was like, people recommended things to me. They were like, hey, try this book, try this thing. And I was like, no, I'm just too overwhelmed. I can't process it. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that. And then I had the same realization I just shared with you a second ago, which is the only way I'm going to get less overwhelmed is by utilizing tools to make me less overwhelmed. I will never feel less overwhelmed by just sitting around and waiting and hoping to feel less overwhelmed. So I got out of the whole idea of I just need to sit and wait and hope and pray that my mental health gets better. I stopped doing that, and I took the power back and said, no, I've got to do something different. And lo and behold, as soon as I started implementing things, it started to become very simple and very baby step-like. So the overwhelm dropped off really quickly. Once I started finding a couple strategies that really worked, it was just a matter of weeks. And I was like, wow, I've got more energy, I've got more clarity, like, cool, this is great. But I had to start from that initial premise of, I'm just gonna do this even though I don't feel like doing it. And that belief was what unlocked me to let me go ahead and take action and make my life better. Number 10, but limiting belief I had, very similar, was I can't focus. And some of you have heard me say before that the word can't is the 4-letter C word, right? It is the number one anxiety-inducing word in the human language, because the more we use the word can't, the fewer choices we convince ourselves we have. And we feel anxiety in direct proportion to how few choices we convince ourselves we have. So when I told myself flat out, I can't focus, what do you think I ended up doing? Spent all day in bed, spent all day on my phone, spent all day in front of screens, right? Spent all day just hoping and praying and wishing that it would change without me taking any type of new action. And I'll tell you the shift that happened for me. Here's what happened for me. What I started to do was, instead of thinking, no, I can't focus, so therefore I can't use any type of like new methodology or try anything new, what instead I realized was I could focus, but that my ability to focus was not a very well developed muscle. So it's not a binary thing like you can focus or you can't focus. Instead, what I realized is, okay, I currently have trouble focusing for longer than 5 minutes at a period of time. So instead of looking at it as I either can't focus or I can focus, which kind of creates this all or nothing, black and white, perfect or failure attitude, instead what I said was, look, I need to train my brain to be able to focus. And what I'm going to do is, instead of trying to keep myself focused for 12 hours straight, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to focus for 5 minutes, and I'm going to, do this particular meditation for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to try to meditate for 7 minutes. And then I'm going to work on meditating for 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes. And that was, now I'm not like saying meditation is the end all be all. It wasn't for me by any means, but it was a very useful tool initially to kind of prove to myself that I could train my brain. And so I just set incremental goals that helped me learn how to focus at higher and higher intervals. We now have a process we teach clients that's more direct and more specific and works really well for people who've not done well with meditation. But the basic principle is still the same, where we start from the premise of course you can focus, it's just that you can't focus for very long currently. But we can increase the amount of your ability to focus only by getting you to take action with new mental and emotional skills and strategies. And so once I unlocked that and said, look, okay, even if my mind gets distracted while I'm implementing this, or even if my mind gets distracted while I'm reading this book, if I believe this book is going to help me improve my mental health, by God, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to stay committed. And even if it takes me a month to get through this whole book, that's what I'm going to do. That was the attitude I had. And that became hugely liberating. Okay. Number 11 was, I was very worried that as I was going to try new methods to overcome anxiety and depression, that I was going to get them wrong. So I kept thinking to myself, yeah, but what if I fail? What if I mess up? What if I get it wrong? I don't know if I can succeed. And here's the thing that changed that for me. Ironically, meditation was the thing that helped me change that. But here's what I meant by that. I had someone tell me once, basically I had someone tell me once, yeah, well, you should try meditation. I said, well, yeah, I've tried it already. It didn't work. And they said, what do you mean it didn't work? I said, well, I meditated for I tried it for 3 days, and they're like, oh, 3 days? What are you talking about? You got to do this for at least 3 weeks before you're going to see a really noticeable change. And I was like, 3 weeks? What the hell, are you kidding me? Because I told him, I think I did it wrong. I tried it and I couldn't really do it. My mind kept having intrusive thoughts. And what this guy told me is, he said, well, yeah, that's what's going to happen when you meditate. The whole point of meditation is simply to decrease the amount of anxious thoughts that you have running through your mind at the time. There's no wrong way to meditate. And he basically taught me 5 different ways to meditate, and one of those 5 was far more effective than me, and it's counterintuitive. It's not the type of thing that you normally guess, and that's the type of thing we teach our clients now, because it's not really traditional meditation, but it works 10 times better. Anyway, point being that he told me there's no wrong way to meditate. That's like saying there's a wrong way to eat healthy, or, going to the gym and exercising, that there's a wrong way to exercise. Now, of course, if you exercise in a certain way, you might injure yourself, right? But his whole point was, it doesn't matter if you're on the treadmill, or whether you're lifting weights, or whether you're doing yoga, or whether you're stretching. All of those things are healthy things. No matter whether you meditate for 5 minutes or 50 minutes, it's a healthy thing. No matter whether you do your inner work in this way or that way, or you do it perfectly or imperfectly, you're still engaging in the healthy behavior. And again, that's when I started to realize, I started to look at things not in a binary black and white way, but in a spectrum kind of way. Okay, there are some things I can do that will improve my mental health a little bit. And then there are other things I can do that will improve my mental health a lot. So let's do all of it. Let's do as much of it as we can think of to just make the mental health better. Because what I was doing is I was doing stuff that only made my mental health better by a little bit, not a lot. And then I said, nah, see, it doesn't work. I'm not going to do that anymore. And then I stopped doing it entirely. And that's a totally limiting way of looking at things. So the new belief, instead of getting all caught up in I worry I'm going to do it wrong, therefore I shouldn't even try, my new attitude was, look, there are plenty of things that there's no way to do them wrong. Just the act of doing them is the healthy thing. And doing it is the most important thing. Not doing it is the only way to do it wrong. And so again, that made me kind of fall in love with this idea that just take action. Just take action. Just try it and implement it and do it and see how it works. And you can't go wrong if you keep trying. Okay, the 12th limiting belief that I had was I won't be supported on my decision to improve my mental health. My family won't support me. My friends won't support me. I had a girlfriend at the time. I thought my girlfriend won't support me. They're not gonna believe that I'm really dealing with anxiety or depression. They're not really gonna understand. They don't really get how I feel. They're not really gonna think that it makes any sense for me to buy this course or read this book or get this one-on-one help or all the different things that I ended up trying. Because there were some things I had a good idea about, and I knew that if I tried them out, I had a good sense that they were going to help me, but I was worried about what other people were going to think or that they were going to support me. And that belief created a big limitation, because what I ended up doing is I ended up giving other people my power, and I felt powerless. And then I blamed and resented them, and then I felt reactive to them, wanting them to give me the support and the respect and the understanding that I craved. The belief shift that helped me was I realized I was giving them power over me. And if I took the power back and I said, well, look, I don't need their opinion or approval to move forward and improve my mental health, that was everything that changed for me. So I stopped asking for people's opinions, and I started just doing whatever I thought was going to work for me and help for me. And lo and behold, as I started doing things that worked for me and helped me out, and I started telling other people, oh yeah, I read this book, it's kind of helping me out right now, or I'm trying this thing I learned on YouTube, or I'm working on this course right now. People started to say, wow, cool, good for you. And they were supportive once I took the action and showed the proof. But when I asked them to believe and trust me that it was going to work first, they didn't believe me. So I stopped requiring other people to understand. I stopped requiring other people to respect. I stopped requiring other people to give me validation. And I took all the power back in my own hands. And that's what enabled me to be the one that led myself to the recovery. And that's what enabled it to mean that much more when I actually did overcome the anxiety and the depression, because I knew I had earned it. So that was a big shift. Number 13 was I had this, by the way, is any of this resonating with you guys? Go ahead and put yes in the comments. Let me know. Which of these numbers have you also believed? Can you put that in the comments too? I'd really love to see that. Which of these numbers have you believed? Okay, number 13, limiting belief I had was the reason I am anxious is because of a past event or abuse. And because I can't change the past, I will feel like this forever. I was caught up in that idea for a long time, and I blamed and resented other people for a very, very, very long time. And again, when I encountered that young woman who survived abuses far deeper than mine, and she was still living with daily joy and peace of mind, I had to realize, okay, there's got to be a way. There just has to. Because it can't just be that just because you've overcome, or just because you experienced one past abusive event, just because somebody took advantage of you or harmed you or manipulated you, that now you're destined to be anxious and depressed for the rest of your life. As soon as I could witness that there was living, breathing proof of another human being who had gone through worse than I had gone through, that gave me all the proof that I needed, that that was not the real source of the issue. That yes, it was a factor, but that was not the thing that was going to keep me shackled to this forever. Now, if you're missing that, what I would encourage you to consider is ask yourself this: do you know of anybody who has survived something equivalent to you or worse than you have, who is living with a higher level of mental health? And by the way, this is not to diminish what you've gone through. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to say that what you went through wasn't abusive or wasn't manipulative or whatever. I don't know your past. I don't know you. It very well may have been. But my point is just to acknowledge the past and call it what it was. If it was abuse, let's call it abuse. If it wasn't abuse, let's not call it abuse. But if it was abuse, let's call it that. But then let's also recognize that even if you were abused, that does not define the future and the possibility for you mental health wise. And look, if I could get all of our previous like clients up on these lives and like get them to do their interviews and all that, I would. But of course, people want to have their privacy and their confidentiality, and we've got plenty of people who do share their story. I hope you listen to them because it will mean more for you to hear it from them. But let me just tell you, without betraying anybody's confidence, that I have worked with hundreds of survivors of the most horrific physical, sexual abuse, and even just things that I can't even fathom or contemplate. I've worked with people who've been literally kidnapped for over a week. I remember one person as just one example. And now she is literally living without anxiety and depression. So if someone like that can do it, I guarantee you can do it, regardless of what happened to you in the past. Now, the past may need to be acknowledged. It may need to be processed. It might need to be healed. All of that is true. But don't convince yourself that the past is going to define you forever. Okay, please don't do that. That's what I believed for a long time. It kept me stuck for a really, really long time until I shifted that. Okay, number 14 belief that I had was I have no motivation to do things. I'm not following through on things that I want to be doing anyway. So why in the world would I sign up for this course or program or help or read this book or do whatever? Because I just don't feel motivated. And it's the whole thing I told you before. Basically, how I shifted that, the new belief that I adopted was I am not going to wait until I feel motivated to do what is necessary to improve my quality of life. That's the new belief that I would encourage you to model. I will not wait until I am motivated in order to do what is necessary in order for me to do what is best for my quality of life. That changed everything. And I still live by that to this day. I still do shit I don't feel like doing, but it improves my quality of life. And so every day I get a little bit better and a little bit more joy and a little bit more fulfillment. Okay. And then number 15 I had was I was in this mode where, I was absorbing a lot of free material and a lot of free content, and a lot of it is valuable. There's plenty of free content and material out there that is valuable and useful. The thing was, there were a couple moments, there were probably 3 or 4 moments where I decided that I was going to invest in some type of help and mentorship. And, no, that's not totally true. 3 or 4 like big substantial moments, big substantial investments. Let me put it that way. I've read over 300 books on mental health in the past 10 years. Probably gone through several dozen, probably close to 30 or 40 courses related to mental health and mental and emotional strategies and tactics. And then at a couple punctuated points in my career and in my, overcoming my anxiety and then going into my career, I made some very substantial investments. I remember one time I paid for mentorship and coaching somebody who was going to help me with things related to mindset and all those sorts of things. And my belief was, if I invest in my mental health, I'm just going to have higher levels of financial stress. And if I have higher levels of financial stress, that's just going to make my mental health worse. But the thing was, I was doing what all anxious people tend to do, which was, and my coach helped me see this, thankfully. He basically helped me realize, look, you're thinking about how you're going to feel in the next 3 days, as opposed to how you could feel over the next 3 years. And, he was very polite and humble and a really good guy. And he basically told me, look, do whatever is best for you, but make sure you're doing what is best for you, right? And so, he basically helped me realize, if I stay in a period of inaction and I'm unwilling to invest in myself, and if I'm not willing to say that my own mental health is worth it, what's going to eventually happen? Well, I'm just going to maintain the same level of mental health that I've already had. And I was comparing what he did to therapy. I'm like, well, therapy is only a couple $100 a session. He's like, yeah, but how far did you get with therapy? And I didn't get very far with therapy. So it was apples and oranges, right? So anyway, basically, instead of thinking about the cost of taking action, I started to realize that there is a major, major, major cost to not taking action. And that was the big belief shift that has helped me in many situations in my life. So now whenever I'm making a decision, whether it's a big investment of time or energy or money or resources or how we organize our company or anything, right? Or even just making tiny little changes like, should I keep eating this food or should I get this out of my diet? I will think to myself, okay, well, what is the cost of taking the action and making the change? How is that going to hurt in the short term? But then I compare that to what will be the ultimate benefits if I do take the action. And even more to the point, what will be the long term cost if I fail to make this change? And that has guided me hugely. And it's helped me make good decisions, when it comes time to make sure that I don't keep avoiding doing the necessary things. And that's what I would encourage you to think about too. Because look, only you can really decide what your mental health journey is going to look like. Only you can really decide how are you going to pursue the path to recovery. And this is not me telling you like you got to buy every single thing that I say. You don't have to like swallow every word I tell you for granted and just like, have no doubts or critical thinking of your own. Like you got to find whatever form of authority to help you improve your mental health that you feel good about. That's what you really got to do. But what I'm encouraging you to do is to find it. And you may not find it until you try. Like implement, try, test, be willing to fail, be willing to take messy action. So much of our human lives are spent in a state of inaction where we end up guaranteeing that we get the very thing we were afraid that we would get if we took the action and failed. So that is to say that all of these 15 things were really just beliefs and fears that I had that kept me from taking action to improve my mental health. As I had these fears that kept me from taking action to improve my mental health, I did not take action to improve my mental health. As I did not take action, my mental health got worse or stayed the same, which was the whole thing I was afraid of in the first place. So it's so ridiculous for us to talk ourselves out of moving forward when the worst possible thing that could happen is we end up right back where we are currently. Whereas if we don't move forward, we guarantee that we stay where we are. It just doesn't make any sense, but we do this all the time, okay? So this is my call to action to you. Chances are there is something on your mind right now that you know that you need to do to improve your mental health. And I don't know what that is for you. Maybe there's a book that's been sitting on your shelf. Maybe there's a course that you already bought you need to go through. Maybe there's a call that you need to book. Maybe there's a video online that you know is going to help you, but you need to really implement it this time. Maybe there's a relationship you need to end. Maybe there's something, but my call to action to you is do it. Don't waste yet another minute doing it, because the more time and space you give anxiety to operate and live in your life, the more it will consume, right? Problems need energy to grow. So the longer you wait, the more you create a pattern of inaction, and inaction creates bad results. So don't do that. Today, immediately, right now, take whatever that necessary action would be to improve your mental health. And I highly encourage you to adopt and model these belief structures. These have served me incredibly well. We pass a lot of these on to our clients. They work really well for them. And remember that if you adopt a similar belief system to somebody else who has what you want, you will end up getting what that person has. I really, truly believe that. That has served me many times in my life. So feel free to rip off other people's beliefs shamelessly, right? So I'm sharing with you, I'm trying to dump and download all of the beliefs that have served me to help me truly stay anxiety and depression free. I really hope you use them. And remember that it has to translate itself into action, though. Action is what creates results. So go ahead and take action today and go ahead and do it. Okay, thanks for you guys tuning in. Really appreciate you. Chat with you guys next week. See ya. Bye.